Hello and welcome to Fiction Fans, a podcast where we read books and other words too. I'm Lily.
And I'm Sarah, and I'm very pleased to welcome Andrew Rubin onto the podcast today to talk about Hell or High Winter.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be talking with you both.
Thanks for joining us.
We have a lot of fun conversation ahead, but first, our quick 5-minute introduction, starting with something great that happened recently.
Oh, yeah. I know this is not the first time one of your guests have said that's kind of a hard thing to say with the world these days. So I guess maybe I'll just go like personal. I committed to trekking the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu.
Oh shit, that's cool.
Yeah. Cut to me with an oxygen tank, but we'll see.
It's good to Hopefully. Challenge yourself though. That's exciting.
Yeah, that's exactly the point.
That's an awesome goal, even if it is difficult.
Yes, and nursing injuries, and yes, but I've gotten into the habit of doing things that I'm not that are out of my comfort zone. I'll just put it that way. I love to hike and I love to travel, especially solo. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go for it. I'm not going to wait for the big 40 milestone trip. I'm just going to do it now. Why not?
Nice. My good thing is a little difficult today because I got the very unfortunate news that my entire team was being laid off of work. But this does have a silver lining. And the silver lining is that one of my coworkers, who is actually a friend from college that I hadn't talked to recently because we were on slightly different teams and they'd just been MIA for whatever reason. It turns out that she has transitioned. And she told me that today. So I was very pleased for her. That was really exciting news to learn, even if it was precipitated by the knowledge that we are now all out of work.
Broke the rules and hit a bummer in your good thing.
I know, but it's such a good thing.
It is.
Yeah. It's nice that she finds you someone that she can lean on be supportive enough to bring you into that moment in her life. So that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I was very pleased that she felt comfortable to tell me as well. And I'm very happy for her.
Andrew, you mentioned how hard it can be sometimes to find a good thing. No matter what, no matter how small, something good has happened. And my good thing this week is that I made applesauce.
Ooh, all right, that sounds delicious.
It is. It's really good, and it was much easier than I expected. I used a slow cooker and an immersion blender, and now I have too many jars of applesauce in the fridge.
That's not possible. Yeah. You can't have too many. So
that was cool.
And then cue all the recipes that you can do from that as well. Get the apple pies going, get the ice cream out.
And it's always the best thing about using a slow cooker is when you walk back into the house and you just get hit with all the smells.
That's exactly.
Very true. Yeah.
And also we're heading into the spring, so it's not fall apple season, but I will say that is always like my favorite. Some family on the East Coast, they have all the apple trees, and then that's just, I don't know. It always apples, applesauce, apple pie, like the fall weather just goes with books so perfectly.
It really does. And continuing the theme, my answer for what I'm drinking tonight is apple cider. My excuse is it's very tenuously related, but there's Greek mythology in the book we'll be discussing tonight, and it doesn't really involve the myth of the golden apple at all in any way, shape, or form. But that is also a Greek myth, and that's my excuse.
I was going to say it's almost adjacent to pomegranates, which would have been like the perfect tie-in for tonight.
It would have.
I need an endorsement deal from Palm Wonderful as well.
Yes.
Funnily enough, I was actually going to be drinking pomegranate juice today, but then I got laid off and decided I was going to drink whiskey instead. So.
Unfortunately, I don't usually use being laid off as an excuse to drink.
I don't either, to be fair. I will drink whiskey any day, but
what type of whiskey?
This is a Lagavulin 8-year-old.
Ooh, okay.
Because I think that the younger Lagavulins actually are better than the old ones, which is a controversial statement, I know, but
I'm a fellow whiskey, Scotch, bourbon drinker, so I've got a bourbon, Devil's Creek, which maybe is sort of adjacent to tonight.
Yeah.
Although it's not brewed. distilled. It's not distilled anywhere close to the underworld, but in Mammoth Lakes, which is like another perfect like location to go to with a book and also for a hike. So for Devil's Creek, that's what I've got tonight.
Wonderful. And other than the book we're about to discuss, anyone read anything good lately? I've been reading this book, so that's my answer.
I'll take that one. That's for sure. I'll say I'm juggling way too many books, but I'm reading the Bhagavad Gita, actually, which is research for the second book, which I'm doing. But I also just find it incredibly insightful and beautiful and poetic and powerful. And I'm like, why didn't I ever read this just for pleasure? And I'm having trouble I'm taking notations in all the margins, and it's more, I'm finding that I'm doing it for personal reasons rather than for research purposes. And it made me inspired to get the Upanishads, and I'm reading a wonderful translation of it. And I'm also speaking of visits to hell, I'm also doing Catabasis. So I'm working my way through her versions of the levels of the underworld. So
nice. That has been on my TBR, but I've not had a chance to get to it.
How about yourself, Sarah?
I actually have read something unusually, because normally, or recently, my answer has been the same as Lily, but I read The Sorcerer Next Door, which is like a 10,000 word, not novella, short story that Jessie Mihalik posted on her website about a sorcerer who moves in next to a witch. It's very cute. It's a wintry, fluffy romance. It was delightful, and I really enjoyed it. It's on her website, so you can read it easily.
You just stole the question out of my head, which was like, where do we find this?
Yes, it is available for free on her website.
Andrew, you jumped to our third question, but I'm just going to go straight to it. You mentioned your research process, or that you are researching for another book in this series. And we see a lot of details from other mythologies and cultures in Hell or High Winter. I'm thinking particularly of the spirit journey that Hermes participates in with the Blackfoot Nation. What is your research process like?
Oh, it is. First of all, I just want to state the Goering was not me. That was just for the listeners out there. There's a very feisty pug in Sarah's home. Research. I do a lot of it. My research process is really just devouring things online and books and buying a lot of books, and also visiting places in the cultures, which is, I want to be upfront. I did not visit the Blackfeet Nation, but I'm someone that loves world mythologies, and I love the intersection of them, and I love the cultures. I've been very lucky to visit with and stay with another tribe up in Alaska, an Alaska Native tribe. But as far as like this research in particular, I do a lot of deep dives. I will pull from whatever academic papers I can and just do a lot of, whether it's primary source, like going back to in this Hindu mythology that I'm diving into at the moment, or just finding different books and my Amazon. I think I have my own Amazon delivery driver that just arrives constantly with different books. And it definitely slows things down. I wish I could tell you the specific ones that I read. Just my head is very much in the ones that I'm reading at the moment. And then when I wrote this book, it was many, many years ago. But usually that's my processes. And this is my kind of cheat for finding interesting sources. And this is going to make everyone like, maybe please hold off firing the arrows. But I go to Wikipedia and I scroll down to the citations. And that's my first foray amongst whatever titles that I know are very well known. And I get those and I read them. But I like to go down and see what they cite. And then I go to those original citations. And that's just like a really great jumping off point to finding whether it's old journal articles and maybe books that are not quite well known or out of print. And yeah, so that's what I do research wise.
I do think that Wikipedia is a legitimate source for finding source material. I don't think that's too controversial to say.
I don't know. I'm just making sure, because I'm sure it's not like doesn't hold up to the rigors of academia of maybe I'm not publishing a research paper, that's for sure. So the other one for Greek mythology that I love is the OI. It's this wonderful source online, and that is fantastic. Especially it's everything Greek mythology, including all the obscure gods, and it not just goes into the myths, but it goes into all the variations of the myths. And you can read through all, bringing in all the quotes from the Ovid and from Homer. And just, it's fantastic because you get to see all the different interpretations of the myths, and it gives you where they appear in different ancient tellings of them. And it's that source, I live off of that site. It's great, especially when you want to find the obscure.
So before we get too far into our questioning of you, this is something we like to ask most of the authors who come onto the podcast. Genre definitions can be such a personal thing, and they vary greatly from person to person. What would you consider Hell or High Winter, and why?
Good one. That is hard. As a writer, I like to call myself genre agnostic. This book, it's been hard because you cannot pigeonhole it into one specific. So I like to say it's contemporary fantasy mythological retelling, but it's modern. I like to think has a lot of satirical elements. I had one review in a paper call it a mythological parody, which I thought was fun, but it's not. But I definitely go for more deeper thematic. It's not just pure parody or satire. To me, it very much lives in the contemporary fantasy next to Lev Grossman's The Magicians, which was deeply inspired me in writing this one, as well as even, elements of Dan Brown, I would say, where I think he very much brings in a lot of research, a lot of historical research, and then brings in some of the fantastical, sometimes the bit like scientifically weird and wild. But in terms of like the second part of your question was like, why do I choose those genres? Is that kind of, or how does it come forward? I mean, it's just what I love. I know that's a very overly simplistic answer, but I'm someone, I really like to sort of reimagine myths, and I like to bring things into our world, or take our modern world or historical world and push it into fantasy. So while I do enjoy Tolkien and all those other the worlds that are so fantastical, I love the ones where it's grounded in our reality, and that it's magical if you just look close enough, or if you just get that other glimpse of the other side of the curtain. And I love that ability for our world to be infused with, in this case, the divine and the magical, or just the magical. So like those books, like I'm always going for them off the shelf, where it feels like I could just get the owl flying in with the letter that I got into magic school.
And in this world that you've created, we see several different pantheons represented, which I'll admit I had varying levels of familiarity with. I think I'm probably not alone in that. How did you decide which myths the reader needed a little bit more background information for?
Oh, yes. This is a battle that always is also even into the editorial process. It's like, how much do you need to bring to the reader without disconnecting them from the story and the things that are fun and engaging? For me, I feel it's a very Western perspective to say, oh, we all know Greek mythology. And I think maybe in some sense it's true, although I've mentioned to people, this is a retelling of Hermes and Persephone, and they're like, who? So I don't think that's universal. I think it's universal among anybody that loves fantasy and loves these genres, and will grab Madeline Miller off the shelf and all these other ones. Hecate, I don't know. I've heard that there's debate over the pronunciation. I felt like in the writing, it just developed as far as things that I found fascinating that I might have not realized when I was researching. And then if it was really fun and interesting to me, I tried to bring it into the story in a way that it was at least entertaining, or just fun and maybe a little too cute, but just things that would be, if I was going to bring it into the story, I wanted to bring it into the voice of Hermes, and the way that I was crafting just a little bit of irreverence with it too. So yeah, the litmus test was if it was something that I was like, oh my God, I love this. And if the reader doesn't know it, it would be really fun for them to know it too. And that was, I want to say, unconscious when I was writing it. And maybe I sometimes get carried away, where it's when you do a lot of research or you do a deep dive into something, you're like, oh, I need to share everything that I've learned ever. And then you start parrying. And then you're like, this is more just me showing off that I've found these things, these little breadcrumbs. So it's always a delicate balance in the writing, making sure that the reader doesn't feel like they're suddenly getting an academic paper, or that it slows down the story, that you disconnect from the emotional side of, because this is really about Hermes rescuing his sister Persephone.
I'll say I really appreciated the extra details, being one of those people who is very familiar with Greek mythology to the detriment of my familiarity with everything else in the world. It really helped me, as even like some of the Mormon mythology in there. I was like, oh, I didn't know that, and now I do. And I would have been totally lost otherwise.
And now listeners are being like, wait a second, I thought we were doing Greek mythology. What about, wait, why is there Mormon mythology?
You're just going to have to read and find out.
Exactly. And you have to you're going to have to find out why Salt Lake City is basically the Switzerland of religions.
Yeah.
So
In a kind of similar vein, you do, at least for the mythology that I was most familiar with, which is, like Lily said, the Greek mythology, you do a little bit of picking and choosing of what you want to use that's accurate to the mythology and what you want to put your own spin on. How did you decide which parts to include and which parts you wanted to change?
To me, it was the things that emotionally fit the story that I was telling. And yes, that is a really hard part with telling mythology, because, and again, I had a little bit of a freedom for two ways with it. One, I have a lot of self-justification of, oh, myths are always retold. The golem became Frankenstein, and like things evolve, and we're constantly orally bringing new myths or taking old myths and telling them in new ways. So that's just my own little sense of justification that I do when I change things, that, oh, I'm just a part of the tradition. But then there are so many different versions of things sometimes. And I wish I could get into the slices of them, because my brain is failing me exactly because there are so many. I could tell you the ones that I chose, and then I'm locked into that now. But yes, there's so many different variations that sometimes it's just me picking and choosing the one that best fits the narrative. And when you're locked into the writing of it, it becomes just the ones that feel most true to the emotional through line. There's various forms of like how Persephone was found in the mythology, and who was it exactly that did it? Was it Demeter or other people? I picked the ones that I gravitated to, and I sort of locked into them. And then I kind of, bringing it into modern day gives you a lot of license. But I hope at the core of the mythology, the research and my deep love of the Greek mythology, I hope is really in there, that I'm not just writing without any baseline of understanding of where these come from and what the origins of them are. So if there's changes, it's not out of ignorance. At least if it is, I don't know it. So
no, I mean, it definitely felt like you were being very intentional. Yeah.
Okay, good. The intentional, until it's something someone's really mad about, and then I had no idea. So. But yeah, there's a lot of myths about how Persephone and Hades had this incredible marriage and partnership as king and queen. But in my version, I still can't get over that the real myth is he kidnapped her. That was a crime, and she did not want to be married to him, and she did not want to be in the underworld. So for me, I took that and I ran with it, that this was a marriage that was poisoned from the beginning. And it's like a joint custody battle, and she's stuck and she can't get out. And what does that look like thousands of years later, when even the purpose for the marriage is not even there anymore? So that's kind of like, so that to me, that was the more interesting story to tell, versus them being the Hades and Persephone of Hades Town.
Yeah. You stole the words right out of my mouth, because there has been such a trend of like reimagining that myth as a romantic love story. And it is fun to twist it in that way, but it has been done quite a bit at this point. So it almost feels fresh to go back to the original.
That's good to know. The funny thing is, I like to call this book my 10-year odyssey, because I first wrote it over 10 years ago. And of course, I was constantly rewriting it, and imposter syndrome and all that. But yeah, there is so much of retellings that I see now. It's that this is great. It's I guess it's nicely falls into the romantasy, and they're king and queen of the dead, and it's macabre, and you can fill in all those things. But I really love to ground it in, I have a background in mental health and mental health education. And I'm like, this was trauma. And this marriage should have never happened. It was forced. It was an arranged marriage with basically a shotgun wedding, if you want to use some of the, and so much of Greek mythology is about trauma. And I think it reflects times of which they lived, but there was a lot of things about rape and sexual violence. And not that I'm particularly trying to make light or I'm showing those graphically in the book, but I'm like, I want to be true to the core of what that is, and then bringing it into our very, I think, more evolved sense of what people are dealing with. And I think the more human you make the gods, the more interesting they are. And they're not just all narcissists that are detached from emotion and suffering, because then they're just not relatable. So I think it's so much more interesting that you have, how does she cope? What is her routine? And in my version, I don't know if this is the spoiler, but it's like she has her side of the palace and Hades has his. And it's like he can't cross, and he's forever because he's now a little bit incontinent and a little bit suffering from a little bit of dementia. And he doesn't remember why she's always upset at him. So he's constantly pining for her affection. And she's like, you kidnapped me. That's why I'm here in the first place. I don't want flowers on our anniversary. Don't give me a narcissus blossom. Screw you. And I will never forgive you for it. But I feel guilty because I see you've declined. And so I like wrapping up this hour tangled perception. The things that we're dealing with, it's messy. Life is messy. And the Greeks made their gods messy. So I love to lean into that.
So I think we have some further questions about that we'll save for the spoiler section.
Yeah.
Because I do think that this could get into spoiler section territory. But going back to seeing the gods in modern times and seeing how they have evolved, was that something that developed organically as you wrote the book, or did you go into it with a clear idea of how you were going to portray them in the modern day?
I would say it was more the latter. I really had an idea of what they would be. Some of them, as I would explore, their behavior modified. But to me, it was very crystal clear, especially with Hermes. I will say, as I wrote it, and because I spent so many years with Hermes, like I found, looking back at him at another stage in my life, I understood more the things that he was dealing with and why he was doing it. I imagine Hermes, he's the trickster and he's a messenger and he's low on the totem pole. And so I felt a kinship to him, as probably we all do, he's the eternal intern. He has no respect. He's a part of the 12, but he's really not. And so he's always had a chip on his shoulder. And so that's how that kind of developed for me. I will say, I wish the book got published years ago, or I had the courage to bring it forward years ago, but I was just, anyways, that's my own personal saga, but it worked itself into the character of Hermes, because looking back so in terms of the evolution of him, what I found, what was so interesting, because I have a god that's no longer relevant. Hermes doesn't have a purpose. He was at the bottom of the totem pole back when the Greek gods were at the height of their power. Now in the age of email, he has nothing to do. So he's just going to antagonize all the gods and screw around for all of eternity. And he's Deadpool vibes. And again, sort of in my own maturing with the character, looking back, I'm like, oh, it's really interesting to me that this is a story about a god that lost faith in himself. And he's chasing the adoration of other people. And everything he's doing is out of insecurity. And he's acting out because the only thing he values, the things he values most, is having people worship you and having attention. And he's very jealous of all these new religions that suck up all the oxygen. They have all the worshipers. They have all the power. They have all the money, the success, you name it, go down the list. And to me, as I was working on it, what evolved with the character was this idea of it feels very relatable to us in the social media era. Like, we define our value by how many people follow us and how many people adore us or worship us or like us or comment and those sorts of things. And so when I felt that, I really went back and I mined it and pushed that further into the character. As the main character and all the others, I had very clear ideas of what their behavior is and how they translate to modern day. But then Hermes, for me, took on another level of relatability to to us today, and or at least to my own evolution.
Absolutely. We will definitely have more questions about Hermes and his character arc for the spoilers section. So before we get there, I have one final question for Sarah. Who should read this book?
So you should read this book if you want a high action modern interpretation of Greek mythology that also incorporates other ancient and modern mythologies and is, like you've just said, applicable to real life, to one's own journey with social media.
I can give a teaser before we move to the spoiler section, which is this is the retelling of Hermes and Persephone. Persephone has been kidnapped again, but this time it isn't Hades. Then, of course, I have the conspiracy grows and gets bigger and bigger as you go through the next books. So I think that's a non-spoiler tease. So
yes,
if it's on the back of the book, it's valid.
Yeah. This episode of Fiction Fans is brought to you by Solsticia.
That's our zine. Each issue has a different theme that celebrates genre and genre blending in a new way.
PDF and EPUB versions can be purchased on our website, and Patreon supporters of all levels get free digital copies.
You can find all the issues and more at patreon.com/fictionfanspod. Thank you for all of your support.
The remainder of this episode contains spoilers. So, Hermes and Persephone have a very complex sibling dynamic that drives a good portion of the plot in this book. What was your inspiration for their characters and their relationship?
I guess we sort of, in hindsight, when we do a lot of writing, we don't tend to see our own patterns, but I guess I've done a lot of sibling relationships, and so maybe I'm hoping my older brother isn't listening to this. But it's very different than our dynamic. We work together. We used to live together. So maybe that was like, I'm constantly trying to process that always. So of all the Greek mythology, when I saw their half sisters and half siblings, and something about it just truly fascinates me. And that was one of the core things that I loved about Hermes and Persephone. I love Hermes as a character. And I'm like, why is he not the most popular god that everyone's retelling? Just because he's so much fun. But Hermes and Persephone, to me, was such an interesting dynamic. And what drives the sort of relationship was him being sent down to rescue her in the original mythology. I expand it to be that he rescues her. We can dive into the minutia of how the mythology plays out beat to beat. But I love the nugget of Zeus sent Hermes down to the underworld to deliver the message that he had to bring her back. And he did, but on the way home, he wasn't paying enough attention, or he missed the moment where she eats the 3 pomegranate seeds. And to me, that idea that he carried that failure with him. Maybe he didn't really think much of her before. Maybe he thought she was spoiled. That's kind of what I sort of interpreted. Like, she was Demeter's daughter, a goddess of the earth and of the bounty and of the harvest. And so the myth talks about her playing with her maidens in the fields and on the Greek islands. And it's just garlands in her hair. And, it's all rainbows and sunshine for her while Hermes is off having to go deliver messages all day. And then this terrible thing happens to her. And he goes and brings her back, and then this horrendous thing happens, which cleaves the world into winter and summer, and it's all Hermes' fault because he didn't pay enough attention, and he failed in that one thing. And then to me, that was like that bond of the two of them as siblings. I would think they would be inseparable from then on. Hermes is suddenly the big brother that is forever wanting to look out for his little sister. But then I love the fact that Persephone, having to take on the role of queen, she suddenly is so important and she had so much responsibility that then she's the adult. So as much as Hermes wants to be the caretaker and look out for her, she's really the one that needs to look out for him because he's just endlessly irresponsible. And if we pull it into modern day, what I love is that we still have winter. We still have seasons. She still has meaning. She still has a purpose. She still makes the world go round, whether people acknowledge it or not. We all are somehow indebted to her and the turning of the world and this beautiful thing of summer, spring, summer, fall, winter, spring. And here he is with no messages to deliver and screwing around and bitter. and yet they still have this bond, and she's endless, and that's what I fell in love with, and that's how I built the characters and what I brought them into at the beginning of the story. And that dynamic felt really beautiful and interesting to me. And then this idea of she's constantly on his case. She's the one, for his point of view, nagging him to be better, to find something to occupy his time. Start a podcast, Hermes. Don't do something productive with your days, instead of just like pissing off the Catholics because you like to poke the lion in the eye. And that's the MO. And then she goes missing again, and he has to do right. Except this time there's no one telling him what he has to do. He has to figure it out himself, and he has to be the one delivering his own messages. He has to find his own voice this time. He can't just speak for his daddy. And it's the thing that Persephone has always wanted for him. And so that dynamic and that relationship, I don't know. To me, it's very real, and not that that's mine. I'm not going around pissing on. I'm taking it away from myself now. This is fiction, but I just really love that, and I love that exploration for something really deeply personal inside a myths about gods and eternal winter and the earth freezing over if Hermes doesn't fix this mistake, and he has to make sure he doesn't make the same mistake he did last time.
So you've kind of answered this already a little bit in what you were just saying, but one of the things that struck me while reading Hell or High Winter is how many myths and stories there are about men rescuing women from the underworld where they are specifically rescuing a lover. They're not rescuing a sibling. Like it's all stories about romantic love, or mostly stories about romantic love. How did Hermes and Persephone being siblings change that framing for you?
God, I love your questions and your show. They're always so good. I was like psyching myself up for like, I'm gonna have to bring an A game with these, knowing the questions from your other interviews. Yes, and by the way, I was very conscious of that. I've done a lot of screenplays. My background is in screenplay, and oh my God, you have to live in tropes and cliches in that world and things to avoid. And I know that is a big one, the damsel in distress. And it's like, there's no way getting around that's part of this story. So for the first part is like, okay, yes, that is a part of this, but I really wanted to make sure Persephone has agency and power. And that was really important to me, that she's not helpless. But the sibling dynamic does change it, in a very real way, because, you look at Orpheus and Eurydice. I was about to say Oedipus. Orpheus and that's a different story. That actually
Orpheus and Oedipus, very different story.
Yes. And of course there's like that. It's such an easy thing to ring that bell, like true love lost, and you're going to go to the ends of earth and hell to bring her back and him back, and whatever the cost. And so it frames it in a different way, because it's a different, purer relationship, and it makes it more about one of personal responsibility. And I also think family is important, just as important. But I think it also forces the character to have a more internal dimension, because I think the idea of going to rescue your lost loved one, it takes up a lot of oxygen, and it carries a lot of weight in a story. Like the motivation is crystal clear. And now Hermes, of course, rescuing his sister. Yes, I think there's the high stakes. It's cosmic implications. It's eternal winter and all that. But I also think it forces you don't have that sort of sexual aspect that kind of can mask the internal changes that have to happen in a character in this journey. Maybe this is like a little bit scattered of a thought here. It totally does change it because it is a platonic rescue mission. There's not that they're going to kiss and marry in the end. The one thing I did find interesting, I know there's like the Riverside track, so there's like, people aren't going to know why I'm like struggling through.
Not because you're being boring, just because they're pugs and therefore rude.
I think you should keep it in with all the tracks. The pugs snoring. Don't edit it out. I have literally put the dogs to sleep in this episode.
Honestly, better than them, like, it's not even growling. They're like, Rowering at each other.
They need a
usually.
CPAP machine. This is like
At least when like now they're calm.
Mhm.
to get back to what I was going to say, the Oedipus part of it, the one thing that I thought was fun to play with is the idea of how myths are beyond myth making in general, and Hermes is trying to also outrun or deal with this. There are versions, and there's the rumors of the myths that Hermes and Persephone were romantically involved, and of course in Greek mythology there was a lot of incestuous relationships, and so this idea of him desperately trying to also correct that myth and being very self-conscious that other people have thought that. And so while he's rescuing Persephone, he's also coming to terms with, okay, what is the love that I have for her? And his own sense of finding himself. It isn't romantic. It is a deeply personal sibling bond, but he's always cared so much about what other people think of him, this perception of himself as viewed by others, and how he's been written about in the myths that we all know today because those exist. I like to think in my version of the stories, like in the world that we're living in, the gods know that the humans have transcribed their stories and we're living with them and they can't change them. So we have these perceptions of the gods that they're struggling with. And so there's like an interesting dynamic that he is also trying to grapple with the fact that, so in the absence of the romantic motivation, I think it was interesting to me to have Hermes grappling with how humans have been living with a version of the story that isn't true to himself, and he's so self-conscious he can't own up him just loving his sister and being willing to go to the ends of hell is enough, and he has to just get rid of the fact that forget anybody that has another version of it or wants to say something, like let them say whatever they want. I'm trying to not curse, but yeah, it's like he has to get over the fact of like, fuck them all. I love my sister and I will do everything to bring her back, and screw everyone that has written a poem that says otherwise.
Absolutely. He is also going on a journey of self-discovery in tandem with his journey to save his sister. How important do you think it was for those storylines to build off of each other over the course of this book?
Oh, to me that's the essence of how you move a story, and I think also that comes from screenplay background. I've done a lot of feature screenwriting in LA. You really have to make sure your character changes by the end of your story. But I also just think that's interesting. I also agree with it. And for me, it's a very clear arc for Hermes. The motivation I love. I hope it feels cinematic when people read it. Like I wrote it in a way that to me was like, I'm a cinephile, grew up with movies, and I'm hoping it feels like you're watching a movie as you're reading it. And it's because it's a clear action. He's got to get down. He's got to get through the ends of hell, one challenge after another, get Persephone, bring her home, or the stakes are literally everything. But then tied to that is the emotional journey of him being the fuck it all, screw around, doesn't give a shit God, pretends not to care, doesn't actions don't have consequences, or if they do, not my problem. And by the end of it, he is going to grow up. This journey demands it. And I like to do a little bit of a tongue in cheek that it's a little self-aware. It's like, Joseph Campbell, eat your heart out. I'm a hero. Like, I am going to do this hero's journey. God damn it. Pun intended.
Me damn it.
Yeah, me damn it. Exactly. Which I really enjoy, playing with the actual like mechanisms and being aware of them in the story, sometimes in a literal like breaking the fourth wall sort of way. But I just think his journey as a god and the character that I was finding at the beginning of the story, it really naturally, and he needs to move that direction. And when it really crystallized for me that this is Hermes is a god that lost faith in himself, and by the end of the book, he has recognized his own ability to have agency and not need somebody else to tell him what to do. So I have the moment in the book where he realizes he's a free agent. Nobody else is going to tell him what to do anymore. If he wants Persephone to be brought home and to rescue her, there's no one else that's going to do it except for him. And so he has to do it. Zeus isn't going to demand it of him anymore. And so that's one pivotal moment. And then as he's confronting through the underworld the sort of litany of his past errors, the relationships, whether it's Karen, again, pronunciation, that's my version of it. People will have theirs. Like when he confronts Karen and the mess he left behind with his once best friend of the underworld and colleague, or with Lily, the goddess of the river Leith. Again, don't kill me for pronunciations.
My understanding is that no one actually knows how ancient Greek is pronounced, and everyone is just making it up. So,
oh my God, I'm going to go with that.
Yeah.
That's my new explanation. Yeah. Thank you. And so as he, each one of these encounters, or of King Minos, one of the judges of hell, and each one of these encounters, it moves the needle for him. He is recognizing the error of his ways. And this is something that I'm carrying into, because I'm almost finished writing book 2, which I'm really excited about. And it really kind of deepens for me in the second book. But it's something that was really, I tried to mine in book 1, which is the gods worship is a drug. They're chasing it. They're left high and dry. They're addicts without a supply anymore. And they're just constantly acting out because they're just jonesing for humans. Don't just leave sacrifices and worship us endlessly. And that's where we get our power. That's our fix. And so they're dealing with that fallout. And Hermes has been living in that shadow. And by the end of the story, I just think it's so powerful, because it's a journey that I'm always on. So I will own it, that it's not the worship of outsiders. It's not the worship of everyone else that really matters, that the only faith that's important is having faith in yourself. And so that's, to me, it's inexorably tied with his journey to rescue Persephone, because it's her hope for him at the beginning of the story that he finds that. And it's the only way he can rescue her, is if he actually goes through the fires of hell to figure that out for himself.
You talked a little bit in the non-spoiler section about Hades. And I'm just going to say, reading about Hades and his dementia was a little rough in this time of America, being governed by someone who more than likely also has dementia. You have also said that this book was your 10-year odyssey. It's been a long process to write it. Can you talk a little bit about making that decision for some of the gods to be senile?
Okay, I'm going to say I actually did have Hades that way before Trump. I will say he has gotten decidedly more Trumpian as my rewrites progressed. So
it felt, yeah.
I mean, I may have thrown in an Elon Musk Tesla reference in my rewrites most recently in the editorial process. Yes. How could you not? How could you not? It's there for the taking, and if you don't do it, it's negligence. It's literary negligence to have a character of that set. If you're gonna write about a mad king who wears no clothes, come on, like, you can't. It's like the thing about the show Veep, where the creator was like, they had to go back and rewrite everything because they're like, the parody real life became the parody, and it wasn't enough anymore. I think it perfectly dovetailed. The Mad King is the Mad King.
I have a silly, not technical question, but just like a little lore question that I kept wondering. How durable are the gods? So obviously when they're fighting each other, they can fight and kill each other. But anytime Hermes was on Earth and in just like a regular human interaction, I was so curious, what are the stakes here? Can he actually freeze to death?
Okay, so I made a rule, and this is my own world building, like, little maybe nerding out part for me. I made a very clear rule, and again, it was one of those things, how much do you write about this? Because how much do readers want to understand your own process? To me, I have it, when the gods are on Earth, that is neutral ground, they can't be killed. But when they are in one of their own realms, they're vulnerable. So if they're sitting on the toilet in heaven, like, you can take one of them out. But if they're on Earth, it's like they're all equal. And they can't die on Earth because that's the humans' realms. That's where the humans die. So it's a bit esoteric. So I have him like, yes, he's trudging through winter and he's cold and he's bundled up, but it's more of, they feel everything we feel. It's just he's not going to, if he gets frozen in a block of ice, like, he'll be there in a couple thousand years if someone chisels him out. So anyways, that gets into the weeds of my own. I've crafted all the rules, and hopefully I don't know if how that came across for you reading
So I do have one question about that. How does that interact with the centaurs who get encased in cement?
Don't put logic at me here.
Sorry.
It's just
Sorry.
a book.
Gotcha.
Centaurs are creatures of Earth. They're monsters.
Mhm. Yeah, I was going to say they're
Fair.
not gods.
They're not gods.
They're not gods. That's very true. Fair enough.
So you tried to get me. But centaurs aren't, they're earthbound creatures, right? So like they're not considered, they lived on Earth. So anyways, that's my like, gotcha. No.
No, that's totally fair.
But yes, I'm sure if you start putting this under a magnifying glass, there's so many holes you could probably poke in it, but I at least hopefully none that I've just tried to cover up. And just I threw some leaves on it and hope you didn't notice it. I don't know. Or hopefully that's not the case.
While you were working on this book, were there any scenes that surprised you?
Oh, yeah. And those are always the best as a writer, when the characters do things that you don't expect of them. I will say the relationship of Hades and Persephone was a surprise. Like I knew that they didn't like each other, but then in terms of writing their relationships, that was really interesting how that came out. And again, spoiler section here, there was a moment where it was the scene towards the end of the book when Hermes confronts Melano and she rifles through his brain and she finds the key to his resentment and what the thing that's driving him and the things that he's tried to hide in the back of his own consciousness. And that really surprised me. And it was one of the earliest things I actually wrote. I usually write in order. I'm a very big, like, I don't write sequentially out of order. I try to very much. And there was just a moment where it was almost like its own little, like it could have been a short story. And I wrote that and then I just parked it aside and it fit into the story later. Definitely those sorts of moments really surprise me. And then it's hard for me to get into other more specific ones also because I'm so much writing the second one now that I'm like, I feel like I'm going to pull in the things that are surprising me now versus when they did back then. But I do know specifically that one moment, since this is the spoiler section, when she sort of, it's the essence of his rage, which is that he sat in a corner while he watched all of them feast. And he was gaslighted and told that he would get his respect and his due. And it was always later. And when he tried to challenge, and it's, I think any one of us who ever asked for a raise, and then the boss was like, how dare you? It's like that sort of sense of aggrievement. And that sort of catalyzed a lot for the character. So I if anything, it could have just been an exercise to understand who Hermes was to begin writing his story. But that was definitely a big surprise and a fun one.
How different is the final product, like the final version of the book, from the first draft that you wrote?
It's interesting because I would say the story, the core of it, always remained the same. And even in the editorial process, there wasn't like knocking on and poking like the crux of it. It was just, it's always so clear. It's a rescue mission. So the plotting of it was really very clear throughout the whole thing. But I would say like emotionally, it really kept evolving and deepening. And again, I think my own going through this story, starting writing it over 10 years ago, and then coming back to it in my later 30s. And there was a lot of evolution just because I had evolved and having lived more life and loss and losing a parent and these sorts of things that happen to you, and then you things differently. And so a lot of the story changed. And there were some really interesting things that I loved. The editor I worked with, his name is Guy, and he's just like an awesome individual and a person, thinker. And so is someone that I've worked with. She was my manager in the screenwriting world, and she was instrumental getting this book published, Marianne, and discussions with them, because it's amazing when you see people that have such a grasp of how stories work and understanding, like they can tell you the essence of a book, like snap of a finger, and it's incredible. And so, like, one of the things that evolved that was interesting for me was the idea of Hermes' perception of his relationship with Persephone. And there was sort of these two scenes that came out of a lot of conversations of a memory that Hermes had that he thought was like this really wonderful, sweet moment that he gifted Persephone. The joy of, like, he saw she was depressed and it was like, turn your frown upside down. I'll show you that winter's no big deal. Like, humans have, pumpkin spice lattes and then they get snowball fights. Like, look at all the joy you bring them. And like, see, you're happy now. It's nothing to be sad about, your predicament. And then as he evolves as a character, he looks back at that moment and recognizes the deep insensitivity of it and what he was really missing, what he didn't understand about her.
What would you like readers to take away from this book?
A deep desire to read the second one.
That's a great answer. More authors should say that.
Why not? Why don't you just say what they're really thinking, and to write a glowing review on Goodreads, and not say that they're my mom doing it. I do hope that the themes that I've talked about, and not to repeat them, but this idea that, like, even the gods struggle with finding faith in themselves and purpose, and this idea that is universal, and there's no place that is immune to that level of constant daily insecurity. And so even if the gods are having difficulty figuring out the 21st century, we shouldn't feel so alone that we're all with our struggle with it, because I think this century really is difficult. I don't know. It's really complicated and it's really hard. And so if the gods are struggling, then I think we can give ourselves permission to laugh about it too, how ridiculous everything is on a daily basis. And so I hope that if they love mythology, they come away loving this version of it, that I hope it's a totally unique one. It's not sanctified and so reverent that it's removed from their everyday life, that they feel like the Greek mythology that everyone loves is as accessible to them in the modern world as it is transporting themselves back several thousand years to ancient Athens and Troy. And so I hope it checks all those boxes, and I hope it makes people feel like they had a hell of a ride and a fun time.
There is a second book, which everyone should read, and which I'm looking forward to. What can readers expect from book 2?
Oh, yeah. The conspiracy grows ever wider. So at the end, we realize Hades wasn't the one to kidnap Persephone, but the entire conspiracy was set up by somebody else. So even though he's dispatched the kidnappers and brought her home, it's just the beginning. So I call it the Holy Trilogy because the first book takes place in hell. The second book is taking place on Earth, and it deals with all the cosmologies around, I don't want to give the spoiler, but a unifying component of a lot of creation myths that are present, from Chinese mythology to Greek mythology, Finnish mythology, West African. And so it's something that lives at the center of all these myths that is very much in play, that they have to stop from a cosmic disaster occurring. So it deals with all the sacred mountains on Earth. And then the third book will conclude in heaven. So all three realms, that the chase continues. And then it also kind of becomes a buddy comedy because it's Hermes and Gabriel are teaming up. And the second book starts with them. The key to figuring out what's happening is the Jewish demoness Lilith. And to find her, they will have to go on a lot of horrendous dating apps in Los Angeles.
I'm here for that.
And Hermes has set up a honey trap and made a very uncomfortable Gabriel the bait. And then we're off to the races. And also Persephone and Isu. And it's becoming like the world's most ridiculous A-team of gods that are going to try to figure out this conspiracy.
Awesome.
I need this in my life. When is it coming out? When can people read it?
From your lips to Hermes' ears, hopefully soon.
Andrew, thank you so much for joining us. It has been wonderful talking to you. Where can you be found on the internet so our listeners can keep an eye out for things like the release date of book 2 and things that might be announced someday?
Just like Hermes, I am desperate for the adoration of strangers on Instagram. And that's I'm at Andrew Rubin 77 is the handle. So I'm pretty much on Instagram and doing all that, figuring that stuff out. And of course, my website, and there's hellerhighwinter.com. And I hope people are interested enough, want to join me on this really bizarre, crazy, weird world mythology tear that I'm going through. I don't know how else to put it.
This has been delightful having you on. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for letting me drink alcohol throughout.
Yes. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Fiction Fans.
Come disagree with us. We're on Blue Sky and Instagram at FictionFansPod. You can also email us at fictionfanspod@gmail.com or leave a comment on YouTube.
If you enjoyed the episode, please rate and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and follow us wherever your podcasts live.
We also have a Patreon where you can support us and find exclusive episodes and a lot of other nonsense.
Thanks again for listening, and may your villains always be defeated.
Bye.